Syd was a huge fan of Bo Diddley. Huge fan. I mean, he loved Bo Diddley, and that's how we started off. I mean, we did "Is King Bee" a Bo Diddley song? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we do R&B and some Bo Diddleys, and attempting the blues, and it's when Syd started writing, and I don't know exactly again when he first wrote his first songs for the band. And I'm not even sure whether he had songs already written before he met us. But that changed everything. Definitely. Because of course we were all totally knocked out with what he was coming up with.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you know, the Floyd would not have made another great blues band. I mean, Syd was not an Eric Clapton, and I wasn't, the greatest blues Hammond organ player, or Farfisa in those days, of course. So I was, of course, extremely fortunate that Syd actually joined the band.
So was there a moment when you kind of felt, whoa, we're really moving into something different?
And not a particular moment. I can't, not a moment as such. No, not a gig or a time. I just remember the first, doing the first album was incredibly exciting, because we were doing things very different to anyone else. We were refusing to cooperate, for example, with what the record company wanted. And in that sense, we had great managers with Peter and Andrew, because they were on our side. They weren't the managers saying, "Come on, boys, you've got to do a hit single." For example, when we see Emily play, we were touring virtually every day, but of course we never played it live. We refused to play it live, not out of spite, and that of course caused huge problems with the audiences as well, because it was fine in London because we were the underground band in London, but as soon as we went out of London, they wanted to see Emily play, and whatever, and we refused to do it. So there were a few beer glasses and stuff being flying around.
So the expectation of this, the pop, you're in the top of the pops and you're in the hit parade, and you turn up and you don't play the pop song, and you play this long, like Interstellar Overdrive.
The people come to see Emily play, and we were having the screaming girls and we had all that, and Syd was definitely a star, and he did like it actually. I think Syd really enjoyed that part of the fame thing, and I think the rest was sort of more uncomfortable with it. I think Syd actually liked it, and but during the first, there's times when we were playing even at sort of private or at colleges, or even private parties, when we did our lengthy improvisations, and people were liking it. I guess that, we all realised that we were onto something. But I'm trying to think of his name, Pete Murray. I always remember Pete Murray, because they reviewed, I don't know if it was Arnold Lane or See Emily Play, but he said, well, this band will last 2 weeks. That's it. Really put us down.
Jukebox Jury.
What?
Was that Jukebox Jury?
Yes, probably, yeah. Now, I may be wrong on this, but our band's reaction to what he said was that we actually built a huge jack-in-the-box with a boxing glove inside it and sent it to him. For a little snippet, and I think it was for him. I think it was Nick's idea, actually. Getting back to Syd, a hell of a lot of damage was done to quite a few people, sadly, Syd as well. So, but then the idea of it all being totally, everyone's out of it on drugs. I mean, everyone was smoking pot, I have to say. Which is, again, why they say lots of people can't remember what happened in the 60s. But it was a special time. But I suspect we got away with some of the stuff we did because everyone in the audience was quite stoned. I mean, I just remember, I don't know which tour it was. I don't think it was the first tour in America, but I remember one time in America, Roger got really angry, and we were playing somewhere, and he got really angry and threw his bass down and stormed off stage, right? We tried to carry on for a bit, and then I decided this is ridiculous. So I went off stage, and then we eventually all went off stage. This is without Syd. We all went off stage and then started having a big argument in the dressing room, trying to persuade Roger, let's go back on. Meanwhile, the audience are sitting there, not a sound. They're having their own good time. We come back, I suppose, 20 minutes later and carry on as if nothing had happened. Now, I don't think you could do that today, somehow.
Sort of laid-back quality to it all.
Yeah, right. Well, there's all sorts of stories.
Well, maybe the lights just kept making beautiful patterns.
The way the audience reacted to us, everyone's heard the stories, and it's true. I remember in the Fillmore, East or West, probably the West, when there was one moment, there's all these famous stories, but Syd literally went on stage and just stared straight into space and detuned all his strings on his guitar and hitting it until it was just this god-awful noise. And we, of course, think, what can we do, And the audience seemed, this is great. They loved it. So,
wow, man.
Yes. But they were all out of it. But the interesting thing, because everyone says, well, was the band also out of it? And, well, I'll speak for myself. No. I quickly learnt that smoking actually made me paranoid and anxious. And I can't speak for Dave and Roger or Nick, but I suspect there wasn't a lot of drug taking with the band because we wouldn't be able to perform, actually. Well, I certainly couldn't.
You had an incredibly rigorous schedule, certainly in '67.
Yeah.
I was thinking that, how on earth would you manage to get yourselves?
Well, some people can. Of course, but for example, I had one, I did have a joint somewhere in Paris about 3 hours before the show, just a tiny little I used to smoke, we all did, but I would only take one puff because that was enough, otherwise I'd get totally paranoid. Didn't agree with me. And but one day, I don't know what it was, and then I just lay in on the hotel bed, really terrified of going on stage. And I said, I'm not doing this again. And then when I went on stage, I remember that it was a weird feeling that I suddenly thought I'd been holding down one note with my finger for about 10 minutes. And that so didn't agree with me at all. So that idea that the whole band were out of it on drugs, clearly Syd, well, he wasn't out of it on drugs in the beginning, but you know the history of Syd, so after that it appeared that he was.
Yeah,
but he wasn't, but then he totally damaged himself beyond repair.
Because this is the big puzzle in a way, that some people involved seem to dispute. Was Syd an acid casualty? That's...
Oh, I don't think there's... Well, in my mind, absolutely 100%. There's always been this talk, particularly with the band and various people, what would have happened to Syd if he hadn't taken acid? Was he going to go that way? And that we can't answer.
But you've got no doubt about it.
One?
You've got no doubt that
But I have no doubt. You see, again, we all have very coloured memories. I remember my memories of it was that, and it may have been happening before, but my memory is that we were recording a Radio 1 show at the BBC, and Syd didn't turn up, and I think it was a Friday, and no one could find him. So we basically waited, and I think we had to cancel the recording, or we tried to do some without him, I'm not sure. And then the managers went off trying to find him. And when they found Syd, which I think was a Sunday or Monday, they told us that, well, something's happened to Syd. And something had happened to him. Total difference. And there's some rumours, and I don't know, that he was living with a whole sort of community of people who were very much believing, rather like Timothy O'Leary, that, you know, acid can release you and, you know, get to the truth and all that stuff.
Yeah, that's
that
Cromwell
was
Road.
Well,
Cromwell Road, 101.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one believes, I think that he may have been with this group of people, and that he took too much. There were other people who said people were spiking his cups of tea with acid. I do believe that he took a huge overdose.
And it was that sort of weekend that was a big change in him, that you experienced.
In my memory, that up until that point, he was a very, you know, he was outgoing, charming, wonderful, friendly, you name it. I mean, a wonderful man, and it was for me a huge change seeing him after that. The lost weekend, where Syd was lost. Huge change. Like, he'd gone. He was still looking the same, but he was somewhere else. So I believe that acid had a huge part to play with it. I really do. And there's people, as I say, that, well, if he hadn't taken it, would he have gone this way? But the psychiatrist Ronnie Lang.
Yes.
Ronnie Lang? Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe. Again, I believe that we managed to get him to see Syd, and his opinion was that it was hopeless. He had done so much damage, because acid, that's what it does to you. Too much acid would literally fry your brains. And I don't know many other people, but I've seen other people who have taken too much acid. It definitely does change the whole pattern in your brain. So yes, I personally do believe it was 99%, if you like, was the cause.
And I guess that
I'd be interested to know what Dave and Roger and Nick feel about that.
Nick believes that too. I think Roger thinks it's a mixture. I think he felt.
Well, I was saying yes.
Yeah.
It's what? Yeah.
But I was thinking that
clearly, if
the
you look
fame
at the
thing,
lyrics of his songs before he was taking lots of acid, he was kind of out there somewhere, in a sense. But in terms of being a social human being, you know what I mean. In terms of relating to other people, he was wonderful. So yeah, that has always been a thing. Well, would it have happened if he hadn't taken this acid? But clearly he did, and I clearly think he was. I don't think he possibly even wanted to take all that much of it. I think it was a terrible accident, or unfortunately people persuading him to take too much. That's what I believe.
You'd always hope that he would come out of it.
Yes, because we're talking about the fact that he was it appeared to be coming in and out of it, like the Top of the Pops things, where the first one, obviously it worked okay, and he was very keen on it, and the second or third, yes, it was a disaster. And you didn't know, like, for example, is Syd going to perform, or is he just going to stand and stare in space and do nothing, or detune his guitar? We never knew. So
What did you do in those circumstances? I mean, it must have been agonising.
we covered up for him as well as we could and played very weird music. Had to cover up his awful sounds, if you like, coming out of the guitar, and this obviously, and I just tried to play around it, as far as I remember, and so did all of us. And because of the time, I think, as I say, the audience kind of accepted it. Not always, but a lot of the time. They just couldn't believe what was happening on stage, basically. I think that was it. Because the audiences at the Fillmore were sort of brought up like the Grateful Dead, Big Brother, Janis Joplin, who were all basically performing quite well. And this weird psychedelic English band not playing anything they recognise goes on stage. Very strange. Oh, the actual... There is, I mean, well, it's Roger, because he wrote the lyrics, but, obviously Shine On You Crazy Diamond, it is about Syd. And even some of the stuff in The Wall, in a sense, is about Syd. And Wish You Were Here, I mean, yes. I mean, it wasn't as such an album dedicated to Syd Barrett, because it would have said it, but it certainly was, it was a big, it influenced, well, Syd's condition obviously influenced, or what Roger wanted to write about, try and express it, obviously, lyrically. And I think it's our best album, personally. I love it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree with you, actually.
Yeah.
Why do you love it?
I love it lyrically, but I also love it just musically. And I love the flow of it, and I just think, I will listen to that album for pleasure. There's not many of the Floyd albums I can. But that one, I don't know, it's the way it all builds up, that main track. From the wine glasses to the saxophone to then the quiet bit, the little bit of guitar and all that, and then into this really interesting sequence of chords for the song. And I just think it's a great piece.
We had Dave picked up his guitar during the interview and started musing about how he'd got the sound and started to play that opening section.
Oh, really?
Which was very nice, yeah. So, right. I mean, it's such a great, the emotion coming in with the music before the words.
Yes.
Quite a long...
It is, yeah. Right.
And pretty unusual for I mean, even at that time, for...
Yeah, there are two moments. It's quite interesting that there's two things in terms of what has developed from a very simple thing. One was Dave's guitar, da, 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 da. And the other one actually was the very simple ping on the piano note, which developed into echoes, which, though I think lyrically for me is a little bit not so great, I still love that piece as well. I think it's a great example of Floyd echoes as well. Both of those came from very simple ideas, quite interesting. And that was in the days when the band were working well together.
Actually, it's interesting you say that, because Roger referred to it as Wish You Were Here as he said something like it was as much about a sense of bereavement for Syd, but also he was starting to realise that the band wasn't going to stay together.
It was, yeah, I mean, in a sense that's true, because, it's this thing of not being there. And it was the last... I think it was the last album where we worked well together. And actually, interesting, you're saying Roger, I know that when we started off, there was a kind of, we weren't putting our heart into it. Maybe because of the success of Dark Side, I think Nick found it quite hard actually, to get back into playing strict tempos or whatever. And Roger certainly said, look, we've got to stop and start again. And the disagreements did start at that point in the band. Yeah. Definitely. But I still think it's our best record.
And I guess part of that, it has to be because there's a lot of, it's sort of driven by this sort of feeling, emotion in it, which is all about Syd.
Yes. Absolutely, yeah. Yes, I mean it was, and I just say I think lyrically, it was very true what you said, and also I just think musically, for some reason, the chord sequence that I wrote with Dave or whatever, it really gelled. It was something quite interesting.
Prior to that, Dark Side, there's even in that there's brain damage.
Yes. Yes.
Again,
Well, yes, right. I don't know if at that point Roger was referring to Syd, but I'm sure they had an influence on that. But, you know, everyone says Dark Side of the Moon really is about madness. So, again, I'm sure the experiences of Syd would have influenced Roger into what he wrote. Roger's big influences, as you know, are possibly teaching, school, the war, and madness. And that's what he's written about, basically, for the whole of his life, whole of his career. Hope that's... and most of the time.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I mean,
as somebody who's obviously, you know, played a really crucial part in the sound of the Floyd, and, you know, as a member, how did that gel with you? That I mean, were those also things that you were like, were important to you? So,
the lyrical content.
Yeah.
No, well, that's interesting. No, quite often I don't think it would be true for maybe Dave or Nick. We were sometimes going to get a little bit tired of this constant lyrics about the war. It was a bit of... I'm not criticising Roger. He needed to do it, but it would be something, oh, not again, you know. Haven't you dealt with this by now, kind of thing. And so, no, I didn't agree with some of the sentiments, but then I wasn't the writer. He was, and he has, you know. And we tried to put the best music we could to it. And as a musician, I've always found it more... I haven't laid that much importance on lyrics. It just happens to be me. If you ask me to sing all the old songs, even now, not our songs, but Bob Dylan's, I probably won't be able to tell you the lyrics, but I'll be able to do the melodies. That's just me. But
it's just
so I could tend to listen to lyrics, but not actually really listen to what they're saying. I listen to lyrics as part of the music. That's just me.
Sure. I mean, that's very true of jazz as well, isn't it? That the voice is another instrument.
Yes, yes, yeah. That's right. But he was the only person writing. I mean, he was our writer. He was our lyricist, and very, very good lyricist.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was his preoccupation with, as I said, these three things.
Why do you think Dark Side was so incredibly successful?
It touched a nerve, obviously, somewhere. It has got a remarkable sort of continuity to it, I think. It's like you need to hear it all the way through, I think. I remember when we actually finally decided to play it live again, which was wonderful. That was on the last tour, because we hadn't really played it live since we were playing it on, what would that be, 73? 3. And we decided on the last tour to actually play it through its entirety. And which I thought was a great idea. And it was wonderful because actually, well, all the musicians who were working with us, they all knew it anyway quite well. But what was great was we decided, okay, because we're doing some of the songs, Us and Them, and Money, obviously, and Time. But we then said, okay, well, let's play through it. And it was remarkable, I thought, for all of us. We actually went through the whole thing with mistakes. But basically, it's like your hand for just taking you, you know. It was really... And then when we had... It was great fun to do. So that wasn't answering why I think it's a great, you know, successful album. I think it's a combination of the lyrics and the feeling of some of the music with the lyrics. It's, obviously, that's what makes a good song. So I mean, but yeah. I think it's the continuity of it, and it did have it kind of this whole musical and lyrical story, if you like. It all made sense, even though some songs weren't related to the other. Like Money was not related to Us and Them or whatever. It tied in. But I can't tell you really, at the end of the day, how to make another one. Obviously.
I guess, thinking about it, it's not so. It's a concept album, but it's not such an obvious thing. I also think it was probably at the height of mine and possibly everyone's period of creativity.
And also, it was a time when, there were disagreements between me and Roger, and we weren't the best of friends, but as a band, we were working together. And everyone was encouraging each other. So it was just maybe well, I Wish You Were Here as well, but there were slight strains there. But definitely Dark Side of the Moon was we were working together. And I've always believed that's the best Floyd music has come from that, actually.
Those two, the Dark Side.
When it's a combination of Dave and me and Roger, let's say the three of us writing together. Obviously there's individual songs which I didn't write or Dave didn't write, but basically just being in the studio playing together. And Roger saying, okay, that's great, it's a chord sequence. Okay, I'm going to try and write some words to that and go to another, and come back. And that was a good time.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get that going again.